fault that you weren't here. I should have made a really big song and dance about the time zone. I will remember that next time. Usually my students are on the East Coast and it's not really that much of a difference. Okay. Mary's here. Hi, Mary. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you tonight?
I'm well. How are y'all?
You going to give us some video? None of you have to use the video. It's more fun if we could see you, but it's totally up to you. There she is. Hi. I know we have to offer you the option because of privacy rules, but I really like to see my students. I like to get to know you, So it's up to you, though. You don't need to leave the video on if you don't, or you could wait till you ask a question or participate in the conversation. We're waiting for one more person here, Sayeda. I think she should be joining us. Okay. So, did you all get a chance to watch the recording? I had to post it on YouTube. It's very complicated. It doesn't let you post it on the course site. I actually had to post it on YouTube. But were you able to see it, any of you? I put the information up to follow the link. Yeah, Yanira, you did? That's good. Mary, Clemence, did you get a chance to see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. We went over the syllabus and we talked about some important principles. So going forward, that should be good to have for when you start doing some writing. As we get towards the end of the course, as you know, you have two really big projects. You have to design your own memorial, right? But in order to do that, you're going to have to do some research and come up with some really clever ways of manifesting in, well, I'll say in concrete, but it can be in whatever you want, and then justify it and then explain it. So you really want to hang on to some of these principles as we go along. The course is so quick. We're on week 2 already, and it's only 7 weeks of this little, it's almost like an hors d'oeuvre, like a sampling of some human history, and I guess you could say an ethical experience too. Okay, let's start. I hope that Sayeda joins us later. You all have this book now? Did you get this book for the course? Okay, now this is gonna make you so happy because I know students you're all overworked and you don't have a lot of time. Look at that text, okay? Look how easy that is. I read this whole book in 2 hours. It's basically, it's poetry, and it's not even hard poetry. It's very easy, and you know what? I didn't think I was gonna like it because oh brother, in the middle of everything else, I gotta read this poetry, right? And then I really got interested in the characters. Yanira, you're shaking your head. You did too? Did you read the whole book?
I'm up to page 37, I believe. We're speaking of the butterflies. I did the same thing. I was like, oh, poetry. And Mateo is an interesting character just from the first page. So yeah,
and it's a good story. I was thinking, it's really going to be a terrible finish or something for some social justice statement, but no, it's good. It actually leaves you on an up note. And what's so cool is you learn so much about the Panama Canal story, but in the easiest possible way. So I highly recommend it. You're going to enjoy reading it. Just, give yourself an hour, sit someplace quiet, make yourself a cup of tea, and it's not hard. So I put on this week, for week 2, I said, start reading Silver People. Try to get at least half of it done. And then next week, we're going to be on the same book next week. So try to, by the end of next week, you should have the whole book done. All right. Also, I want to let you know that the grading situation is being worked out. The technical staff had got back to me tonight and said they think that they've got the grading center figured out. So hang in there. I will be grading your post from last week. Going forward, just bear with me on this course. The first time that I've worked through this course, I inherited it like the shell from Blackboard. I just, got it. And it just really wasn't thoroughly ready. So I keep running into snags. I've got a killer work ethic, and I like to get all of my grading done for my students on Monday or Tuesday. It's good for you too, so I can get it too soon. But I went in there and I couldn't get anything to connect to the grade center. So hang in there, work with me, we'll get there. Oh, Sayeda, you made it. You're here. Hello, welcome. If you're out there, you're going to give us any video, or are you just going to just say hello?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, it's good to have you back. Okay, everybody's here today. Great. Okay, I want to begin with, we're only going to go an hour, right? I always end on time, so no problems there. I need to hear from some of you a little bit tonight. I want to know if you had a chance to look at week 1's Holocaust Memorial material, because when I met with a couple of you last week, that hadn't really been done yet. So I'm going to ask tonight, did you look at the Holocaust Memorial Gallery? Did you see any examples of memorials that really impressed you, that really spoke to you? Unfortunately, they don't give you a lot of the history on each of them, so I did my own history research background to find out what each one of the ones that were there represented. So speak to me. Did you look at the Holocaust stuff? Did anything jump out at you and teach you anything or move you in any way? Go ahead.
I can go first. I did see the pictures, but I think what impacted me the most was the video that you had a link on with Oprah interviewing the gentleman. Just the fact you could see it in his face how emotional he felt. I mean, I'm sure it's something. It's hard to go back to the place where you were torn away from your family and millions of lives were lost. It's a massive gravesite. I did not understand the magnitude of how big the place was until she showed that it was about 5 football fields put together.
Yeah.
It's enormous. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard of the Holocaust and I've seen, sometimes I try to stay away from those images, but it's good to dig in and not just try to go and see the full story. So I've even looking more into the Holocaust and listening to the survivor story. So it was, that impacted me the most.
I like what you said there about seeing how large Auschwitz was. You know, we don't realize the scale of that place. It was and has been described as a city. It was a city of dying people. The ones who were good enough to work went to work under horrible conditions and didn't live very long. And otherwise, they were separated right off the train and sent immediately to the gas chamber. And it was an enormous place. And it was only one of hundreds of concentration camps spread out around Europe. Mind-boggling that human beings can do this to each other. Anybody else want to jump in there? That was great. That was the, you're talking about the Oprah Winfrey interview with Elie Wiesel, who wrote Night. If you get a chance, read Night. It's a classic.
And I'm ordering the book too. I'm
good.
Reminding me.
Very good. It's one of there's a few books out of the Holocaust that are at the top of the reading list. That's one of them. Another one you might want to read is by a man named Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Highly, highly recommended. That's my favorite, Man's Search for Meaning. Elie Wiesel, it's fantastic, but he still leaves you wondering, how does a human being cope with that kind of situation? It's so horrible. It's so beyond comprehension. He doesn't really give an answer. Maybe it can't be coped with, but Viktor Frankl does address the question of suffering and self-transcendence. What happens? He said, Viktor Frankl's conclusion in Man's Search for Meaning is that he noticed in the camp the only people that survived were the people who had a reason for living, the people who had someone they loved that they were living for, some task or craft or work that they had been doing that they wanted to get back to. He had both of those things. He had his wife. He didn't know that she was already dead. She died, they killed her very soon in, but he didn't know that. And so he lived for her love, and he also was a psychologist, and he was very, very much into his research in how people cope with suffering, and there he was in the worst of all suffering situations. So he considered that experience part of his research, and he wanted to live. He wanted to get out and get that book written, and so his conclusion about horrible situations like that is, if you love someone or you have a reason to live, you can make it through the dark valley. You can get to the other side. I highly recommend that book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. It's in 2 parts. The first part is his story about Auschwitz and the other concentration camps he was in, and the second part is about his psychological theory that he actually developed after he got out. You can read the first part in an hour or 2 hours. It's really worth it. Let me hear from someone else on the Holocaust. What did you learn?
And also, Yanira, you can also go to the Holocaust Museum that's downtown.
Yes, I've been there. It's been a while, but I've been there. I heard there's more information on there, and it's even to where you can hear headphones, hear stories. So I need to swing by there.
Yep. There was a
Thank
great
you.
phrase that came out of the Nuremberg trials, you know, when they only tried a few of these terrible perpetrators, but the reason they did, they said, was lest we forget. And unfortunately, my experience as a teacher, my students know very, very little about the Holocaust. They don't know how it happened. They don't know really what happened. There's in the front of the Library of Congress, there's this statue that has a quote on it that says, the past is prologue. In other words, if you don't know the past, then you're doomed to repeat it again. So we need to, like, Yanira taking that trip to that museum, good idea. Just knowing, just having the consciousness of it. Very good.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. And I have 4 kids, so I think it's my responsibility too, not just the school's responsibility.
You got 4
to,
kids? You don't look old enough to have 4 kids.
Oh, thank you. I get that. Thank you very much. I get that a lot. But I have a 19-year-old. She's going to be 20 in
Wow.
a few weeks.
Well, you're
She's
keeping
in
yourself
college
well.
right
I
now.
don't know
We're
what your secret is, but
Thank
that's
you.
fantastic.
No alcohol, no caffeine, no smoking, no
Yep,
nothing.
yep,
Thank you.
Yep. You can
Thank
tell.
you.
So you've got 4 children, and I think that's an excellent point. If you have children, or like in my case as a teacher, I feel obligated to understand some of these really important issues, because where are the young people going to learn if we who are or who have care for them don't provide them with that information? So that's a great motivation.
I actually made them watch the video with me. I said, hey, I need 10 minutes of your time. Come here real quick. And they watched it, and they knew. They're like, oh, I know. I'm like, you really don't know, believe me, because I thought I knew, but you really don't know.
Really don't
and
know.
they were like bug-eyed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're living in glory, buddy. In this
Yeah.
country, it's nothing compared to this right now.
Well, that's an interesting thing that you're saying, because we're going to talk about American monuments and memorials, later in the course. And right now, if you listen to our media, this is like the worst country in the world. So you need something to compare. You could have them watch that and say, hey, at least we're not doing that. Not yet, anyways. Very good. Yeah. Okay, anybody else want to tell me something that impacted them from the Holocaust information, the memorials that we looked at there? Anybody get a chance to look at it? I know Sayeda told me last week she hadn't even heard of the Holocaust until that night. So that tells you that we need to be learning. Go ahead, Mary. What do you want to say?
One of the things that I seen was the memorial that they built in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
All of the different structures that were all different sizes with the little bricks with talking about the 6 million people that were killed.
Yeah.
I thought that was like, wait a minute, what?
Wow. Yeah.
That was really interesting. But one thing I was like, why are these people laying on these monuments? They're just laying, taking pictures, but hey.
That's an interesting thought. And here's another aspect of these memorials and these monuments. People want to touch them.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the most successful monuments are ones that people can actually get on top of. Or do you remember the one the guy built to commemorate a fountain that had been in the town square, and the Nazis destroyed it because the Jews had built it? So he built his memorial, a fountain that went into the ground, right? And you have to actually stand over the glass and look down into it. That kind of interaction with people makes them feel that somehow the history is getting close, that they're touching it, that they're living it in a certain way, as opposed to having something really, at a distance. You could read about the Holocaust, but if you, walk around and walk on and lie down and, have this kind of physical contact, that probably is a memory more powerful than anything you're going to get out of a book about it.
Yeah, there's that, I can't remember if it's in downtown Dallas, but there's the, World War II memorial where you can get a piece of paper and a piece of chalk, or the black charcoal thing. You can get the name and stuff on the people.
Yes,
There.
Anthony, as a matter of fact, I don't know if that started in Dallas. I know it's in Washington. If you go to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, it's a huge black V kind of spread out with all of the names of the people who died in Vietnam. I actually got to co-write a book about a priest who was killed while he was ministering to a soldier on the field. And so I spent like a whole year in the book, and as soon as I could, I went to Washington, D.C. I found his name. He was listed there because he was a chaplain, military chaplain who died. And I took the rubbing and I had it on my wall for years in the house that I was living in. I had his picture. He won the Medal of Honor posthumously for trying to save this guy. So I had his picture and then the rubbing, and I gave it away to a dear friend eventually who loved his story. But that kind of thing, again, it's a great example. You feel like you're making some kind of contact with somebody who was could have been somebody that you knew who died, or in my case, somebody that I came to respect very much because of my research, right? But it feels like a contact. Excellent example. Excellent example.
And then I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying in a comment about the Holocaust thing, and during World War II, the Nazis would advertise the camps as like happy places to go, sanctuaries, and so I've read some articles and seen some people talk about how those, like, the camps were actually happy camps, not death camps, and they never knew that they were actually death camps until somebody told them or something else. So that's another reason why it's probably a good idea to keep the monuments and stuff like that up.
As a matter of fact, Anthony, it's a very good point. We were talking about it last week in our session. No one believed it could be happening. Like, when the information started to trickle out that the atrocities were occurring, the first reaction of most people was no. Human beings wouldn't do that to each other. That's not possible. In fact, if you remember this interview with Oprah with Elie Wiesel, they didn't even believe when they got off the train. They could smell the burning flesh in the crematoriums, and they still couldn't believe it. So there are certain kinds of evils that are so beyond us, we can't get our minds around it. And again, here's where your monuments and your memorials can help people to encounter that. Right, these days in our country, we're having a lot of conversations about ripping monuments down, and we have to identify evil. We have to put a name on it. We have to recognize that it happened. A lot of people want to whitewash the past. They don't want to talk about things which are so hard for the human mind to comprehend, But this is one of the bad things about us not studying history anymore. We don't know these stories. So when things start, lining up again to bring us back into those horrible places, as a people, we can't read the writing on the wall. One of the great things about a course like this is you start opening your eyes to what human beings can do to other human beings. Okay, if that's all on the Holocaust for the moment, I'm sure we'll circle around to it again. And I just want to warn you, my internet connection has not been great lately. Evidently, I just heard this today from someone at the library. Everybody's internet connection is struggling right now.
Yes, I think you're lagging a little bit. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it wasn't just me or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, evidently because everybody's online for school, internet in general is just slowing down. So I apologize if you're not getting the best of me. So far, you guys look pretty good. Some of the videos a little scratchy, but so far you're good. Okay, let's talk about the Panama Canal. Did anybody know anything about the Panama Canal before this week?
All I knew, honestly, is that a lot of people had died during the construction, but I did not know as much as I've been researching now.
Yeah, same.
I would say it's an all but forgotten event today. Nobody ever talks about the Panama Canal anymore, right? I know I'm older by several decades probably than most of you. I do remember when Jimmy Carter shook hands with the president of Panama and the control of the Panama went to Panama. It was completely, after that point, out of the control of the United States. I remember that. That's it. Just going into this class, I had nothing. So I was amazed. Does anybody want to share something that amazed them before I talk about what I'd like you to be aware of? Did anybody read anything or learn anything so far that they found interesting or surprising?
I didn't really do much research outside of it.
What's that, Anthony?
I didn't really do a lot of research outside of besides what you gave us.
Yeah, and so did you learn anything interesting? Did you find anything interesting?
I just surprised because I just know there's a Panama Canal, and I didn't realize it was actually that bad up until now. Like like she said, there was a lot going on with it.
Let me ask you guys a few questions. These are basics, okay? These are things that you should really make sure that you know. Who tried to build a canal first? Because we know the Americans did it. United States pulled it off. But who tried before they did?
Was it France?
It was France. Yeah, very similar to Vietnam. The French were there first, and then we went in. You know, yeah. The French tried in the 1880s. They tried to do it, but they had a bad construction plan. Their engineer wanted it to be at sea level, and that wasn't going to work. And also, they hadn't expected malaria, yellow fever, the terrible incessant weather, the rain, so they pulled out. They left a lot of equipment there. So when the Americans showed up, I think they spent about $40 million buying the French equipment that was left, although they really couldn't use much of it. So the United States showed up in 1904. They took over the project in 1904. How many years did it take for the canal to be finished?
10.
10 years, very good. It was finished in 1914. They had a big grand opening of the canal in September of 1914. Now here's another interesting part of the story. Obviously the United States wanted to build the canal, and it wanted control of the canal, but there was a political problem. What was the political problem? Got to get that history down. Got to get that history. Okay, make sure you look at those links on the under week 2. Make sure that you understand the background here. Panama was not an independent country. Panama was actually part of, anybody know? Colombia.
Something with an, okay.
Colombia. So here's what the United States did, okay? Another interesting part of the story. The United States fomented and supported a revolution, the Panamanian Revolution, so that Panama could break from Colombia. As soon as it did, the United States recognized it as an independent country, and then it cut a deal to build the canal and to have control of the canal until 1999. So there we go again. I mean, you know, when are we ever going to learn? Do not get mixed up in other people's politics, but this is what happened, okay? Revolutions are not pretty things, but the United States believed that this was a necessary thing to do because we needed that canal. And the United States needed to control the canal. This is why. Have you heard of something called the Monroe Doctrine? Anybody know what the Monroe Doctrine is? Go ahead, Anthony. What's the Monroe Doctrine?
I heard of it. I can't exactly remember. It involved the interference with Russia and the spread of communism, I believe.
Well, it was applied to that later
correctly.
because it existed already. James Monroe was, I think he was the fourth president. He decided that the United States, in order to protect itself, it couldn't have any possibility of hostility around it. So the Monroe Doctrine basically told the rest of the world, you can't have any military presence around us that's threatening us. You can't get involved over here in revolutions with these countries south of the border. You can't in any way have any military stuff going on because we need to protect our border. So the Monroe Doctrine kind of spread a shield all around the United States. This goes way back in our history, almost to the beginning. So with the Panama Canal, the United States justified it in the same spirit as the Monroe Doctrine. Because as you realize, the Panama Canal was going to allow the Atlantic Ocean to be connected to the Pacific Ocean. And by allowing this connection right underneath the United States, right, this free passage of vessels coming and going, this increased the possibility of the United States to defend herself so that her Navy and whatever military things she needed could go easily from one side to the other through the Panama Canal. In fact, the very first vessel that traveled through the canal when it was finished was an American military ship on its way to fight World War I, to participate in World War I. So that shows you right there, okay, on the one hand, throwing revolutions in other countries so that we can get what we want, maybe not a good idea. On the other hand, it was part of a diplomatic world strategy to have the canal so that we could better defend ourselves and better police the south of our border in particular, which was never a stable area, and so was always of concern to the United States. That's why we got involved in Cuba. That's why we fought the Spanish-American War. We're always very concerned about what's happening to the south of the border. Okay, so you can see a little bit of background there. Yes, go ahead.
It was good because the Japanese actually tried to attack Panama Canal to Pearl Harbor at the end of the war.
Yes, in fact, and Anthony, what you mentioned about communism, when we had that face-off with the Soviet Union, it was the Monroe Doctrine that was cited as, hey, this is a long-standing understanding between other countries in the United States. You don't put missiles on Cuba.
Yeah,
you can't do
was
that,
a big part.
right? Because that violates the Monroe Doctrine, which ultimately goes back to keeping ourselves safe. Okay, so how much did the whole thing cost in the end? Anybody know? Anybody pick that up? The Panama Canal took 10 years, right? And this is a figure from back then. This
Was
isn't
it
even the figure that we read today.
250,000? No.
How much did
10
the
million.
whole
I'm sorry.
10-year project cost?
Was it 10 million?
It was in the 300 millions.
There
Oh,
you
it's
go.
up.
You're getting close. Add another 50 million, about 350
Yeah,
million.
it's 375 million.
There you go. And that's a figure from then. It's not even what it would be today. I mean, one can't even imagine what the cost would be today. How long is the Panama Canal? Did anybody get that? How long is it?
Is it 10 miles?
10 miles, I think.
No, not
50.
10.
51 miles?
What?
51 miles?
It's
51?
51. Some people say 48. It depends on what you're measuring. A good average would be 50. 50 miles. And the other thing, it wasn't all flat land. They had to blow up mountains, rip out forests, right? And another thing they didn't expect, the Americans were able to deal with the yellow fever and the malaria because one of their doctors figured out it was the mosquito that was responsible. So what they started doing was they started spraying, lakes and ponds and trees and anywhere they could find moisture, they kept, spraying, and they got rid of the mosquitoes, so they were able to reduce the incidence of yellow fever and malaria. But the other thing that they couldn't do anything about was the rain. So what they would do is they would blow up a mountain, like carve out a mountain, and it would be raining, pouring, and this would create mud, and the mudslides were lethal. Many, many, many people died in these mudslides. So we're talking about incredibly dangerous work. It is an unusual story, too, in that as an engineering effort, you had easily 50 different countries represented in the working population. Easily 50, probably more. The first efforts out there, they took anybody they could get. Any down and outer who needed a job anywhere in the world could come work for them. But they figured out that the best people to work for them were the people from the West Indies, from Jamaica, from the Caribbean, from that part of the world, because they were already acclimated to those weather conditions. So huge amounts of West Indians ended up being employed in the Panama Canal. And then, of course, as you will read in the book and in those sites you have, it was thoroughly segregated. So you have this wonderful thing that was built, the Panama Canal, which today, I think it's about 12,000 vessels go through back and forth every day. I mean, it was the start of world globalization. The whole globalized market started with the Panama Canal. It did not start with the internet. It started with the Panama Canal. You've got 13,000 vessels going back and forth in the Panama Canal every day. That's a phenomenal thing. And it's considered one of the great, I think somebody called it the 8th wonder of the world, engineering wonder, one of the greatest engineering feats that anybody ever did. But the people that built that canal lived basically in apartheid. If you know what that word means, if you remember South Africa. Basically, you had the white people and you had people of colored skin. And the white people, they lived in nicer houses, they had privileges, and they were paid in gold. And people of darker skin, barely fed, lived in not even something as good as tenement housing. They had no freedom. They were practically slaves because they had signed a contract, and if they ran away and were caught, they would be thrown into jail. So they had no freedom. And they didn't get paid in gold. When they lined up to get paid, they got paid in silver. And that's why your book is called Silver People. They had no rights at all. Now, at a certain point, things got so bad that they began to realize they had better care for their workers in some way, or they weren't going to finish. And also, the workers were beginning to organize. There were a few anarchists in the group who were fomenting rebellion and strikes. So a man named Lieutenant Colonel George Washington Girdles, he took over at a certain point. He squashed the strikes. He was very, very strict about getting the job done, but he also realized they had to take care of their people better. So conditions were improved a little bit, but it was basically a 10-year experience of segregation. It was a 10-year experience of apartheid. This is interesting to reflect on, because one of the things we see in the course is that oftentimes with humanity, you have these great steps forward, these wonderful accomplishments, but at the same time, great damage is done. Great damage is done to human beings, and great damage is done to nature. It's almost as if in the human condition, this is one of New England College's LAS courses, which are all about the human condition. It's almost as if the human condition, by nature, has this tension in it. For every good thing we try to do, there's a corresponding evil. Like, think of your own life. Just think of your own personal life for a minute, okay? You're going to college, you're getting your studies done to get a better job, to make, have a better living in the future, or to make a better contribution. This is all good, right? Well, that's good. And when you get your degree, you're going to celebrate it. But has there not been a price? Right? Has there been a price in your loans, student loans that have to be paid back, that are collecting interest even as we speak? Is there not a price in your relationships? Not being able to hang out with your friends or your family, or wondering if you're being there for your kids. And it's as if it's part of the human condition that for every good thing that we achieve, there's this other part. And that is really evident when we look at modern technology, look at your cities. Isn't it great to visit New York City, or walk around a city and admire the incredible architecture, and admire, have great restaurants, and you have libraries, and you have, art places, opera places, and theaters. It's so great. And we love going into cities and having and enjoying all the things that are there. But, where's the garbage going? What toll on the environment does a city take? Where is all the refuse, human waste going? What happens to, to the birds that used to live there, that no longer have their perches? What about the other animals that no longer have their dens, that can't meet and mate and keep their species going? What happens to the indigenous peoples that may have lived there originally? So this is this kind of weird tension we've got in human life. We want to make advances, we want to go forward, and at the same time, every step forward also has a cost, and we have to sort of balance it. Okay. One of the best parts of the Panama Canal story for me is got to be Teddy Roosevelt. You know who Teddy Roosevelt is, right? He was Republican, a populist Republican president. So his story should say a lot to us today. Just looking at his story, looking at who he was not really like any of the other politicians. He was young. He became president when he was only 43 years old, 26th president of the United States. He became president because of a tragedy. Does anybody know what the tragedy was that made Teddy Roosevelt president?
Wasn't the water the shoot, hold on, I can't remember. Oh yeah.
Why did Teddy Roosevelt get sworn in? He was vice president. I'll give you a hint. He was vice president.
It was the wasn't it the president at the time was stealing information or something like that from the other presidents or something. I feel it's like the water something effect. I can't remember.
Well, it sounds like a great movie, but I'm afraid it's more tragic than that. He was vice president to President William McKinley. And McKinley was the third president in a 36-year period to be assassinated. Here again, we know so little of our history, right? 3 presidents were assassinated in a 36-year period, and the third one was William McKinley. He was shot. He went to Buffalo to attend the fair there. I think it was the World's Fair. And this guy came up to him. He was an anarchist. He had what looked like a bandage around his hand. He looked like he was wounded. He actually had a gun inside his hand. He reached out to shake the president's hand, and he shot him twice. And poor President McKinley lived for 8 days before he died. And upon his death, Teddy Roosevelt was sworn in, and the nation just swooned. No one expected this man to be president. Teddy Roosevelt was a loose cannon. He was not someone that you wanted in the Oval Office. And he was a good vice president. And you know why he got to be vice president? Because nobody wanted him to be the governor of New York anymore. They considered him too politically ambitious. They wanted him out of the way, so they gave him the most do-nothing job in the country. They had him become the vice president. And they figured, this guy is just going to stay there and do nothing. And then William McKinley got assassinated, and Teddy Roosevelt became president. Talk about a story. What's that?
I was thinking about the Watergate scandal
Yes.
with Nixon.
We haven't lost a president yet to scandal. I think Trump's going to make it out in the next 24 hours too. So we've lost them to assassination, but we haven't lost them to scandal yet. Nixon resigned.
He's gonna be the first one.
Yeah. Well, he's not going to be in office. So if they impeach him, they're going to have to find some constitutional grounds for it. Because
Right.
impeachment only exists to get rid of a president. If he's not the president anymore, what are you doing?
President, that doesn't work anymore. That's right.
I can understand them being mad at him, but I kind of wish that they'd sort of forget him now and get back to the business of the country, because we sort of have a lot of issues we need to work on. Anyways, that's my opinion. So let's go back to Teddy Roosevelt, because he's an important player in this Panama Canal story. Teddy Roosevelt is only 43. He's a young man still. He's got a young family. He's full of energy. As a person, you ever want to actually just meet an American figure that'll blow your mind, you should watch a documentary on Teddy Roosevelt. Incredible life. His first wife died a few years into their marriage. They had one little girl. She died on the same day that his mother died. Talk about getting hit twice with death in one day. He was so grief-stricken, he went out to the Dakota Territories. He lived like a cowboy for a while. He became like a sheriff. He went hunting. He herded cattle. He just lived out in the wilds. And he's got his mind back together, and he came back, and he got into the political life. But this kind of energy and dynamic moving forward marked Teddy Roosevelt's character. So when he became president, everybody held their breath, because like, oh no, what is he going to do? His policy about being president was, if you're the president, you should not be siding with one party or the other. You should look at the American people, and you should decide what is the best thing we could do for this country. And that's what he did. Some people loved him, some people hated him. He didn't care. He just looked at the situation and said, this is good for America. This is what we have to do. And so one of the things he decided we had to do was the Panama Canal. He understood that as a strategic decision, this was a good one for the protection of the country, and it was going to be good for commerce, for business. That trip, if you didn't have a Panama Canal, you had to take your boats and go all the way down and around South America. Or you had to strike out across the Atlantic and go all the way down and around Africa. I mean, the Panama Canal was a huge change in the way the world did commerce. So He's one of the main forces behind this. And when they told him they were having troubles, this is classic Teddy Roosevelt, instead of staying in the Oval Office and sending a letter, he actually went to Panama. He visited the site of the construction of the canal. And he showed up there with his big white hat, you know, and his bully attitude about everything. And people took pictures and they loved it. He was a media celebrity. He ended up getting elected to the office after he filled out his first term that he simply inherited. He was elected for another term. So he ended up serving from 1901 to 1909. The Panama Canal was not finished under his administration. It was finished under Woodrow Wilson's administration. But he was really kind of the heart and soul behind the project. You have a video about him. It's really cool. One of your links has several, like as you go down the article, there are different videos about him. I encourage you to spend time with them and just learn who he was. Incredible, incredible guy. Okay. So if we think of this story, which is going to be captured in this poetry, okay? Imagine, if you will, just for a second, you know, you have South America and you have Middle America. You got North America up at the top, you got Middle America. And then you have this little piece of land connecting South America to Middle America. It's called an isthmus, just this land, okay? And at its most narrow point, it's about 50 miles long at its most narrow point. And the canal doesn't just go east to west. The canal actually goes south and then east, if you look at the map. So before you even start with a canal, what's there already? What is there already?
Like in terms of what, like the ocean, land?
Well, you got oceans. You got two oceans, one on each side. What else you got?
The land in between.
You got land. Tell me about that land. What's on that land?
Animals, people.
Animals, people. Tell me about the people. They just visiting?
They live there.
They live there. So what does that mean? Concrete terms, what does that mean?
Like, they're natives there, or?
Yes, we call them. We can call them natives. So
Is that
what
what
does
you're
it
asking
mean?
for?
They had to
They
leave.
like-
They had to move away.
Yeah, I was gonna say they were removed from their lands where they were living.
They have to move. It's not like you go and you choose 50 miles of territory, you know, and that's it. And you just start building. There are people there. There are
I'm
people who have
guessing they were
lives there.
forced.
Go ahead.
I'm guessing they were forced to leave.
Yes. So you got people with long history there, long-standing ties to that land, families who've been there for generations. You have forests. What's in the forest? What's in the forest?
Trees, vegetation, animals.
Yep. You're gonna read about some beautiful things that are down there. They have these monkeys. They're red. They call them howlers. Gorgeous, gorgeous monkeys. You have these butterflies. All through the book, you got pictures of butterflies. Panama, that's how you would pronounce it with the accent, Panama means many butterflies. You have these beautiful birds with the colorful beaks. I think they're called toucans, right?
Yeah.
You have crocodiles. You have all kinds of nature going on down there. This is the rainforest. And in order to build this canal, all of this is going to have to be wiped from the map. Okay, so you build a canal on the isthmus. What have you done now, geographically speaking, to that area? Because this is going to be important too, right? You're going to carve out this huge ditch right along this isthmus for 50 miles. You have to get rid of all the people who live there. You have to destroy all of the forests and the habitats of the animals. And then what else are you doing? Think big. What else are you doing to that area?
Well, I'm just gonna take a jab at this. I'm assuming the foundation of the earth isn't that stable, in my opinion, because they've now removed a chunk of land. That's one thing.
I like
That's
what you're
my
thinking.
mind.
Let's go with it. You're moving a chunk of land for 50 miles, you dig a ditch in an area that used to be flat and mountainous. So what have you done to the natural environment, essentially?
Well, I'm sure that the forest was also very dangerous with venomous snakes and
Mm-hmm.
and creatures. So, what have you done to the environment? Well, that vegetation, that beautiful vegetation, is now gone.
Yeah, and you got something
Um,
else there. You got a ditch. And you know what you're
a
going to
ditch.
do? You're going to fill up that ditch with water and locks that are going to raise ships and lower ships so they can sail through, right? So you have now a ditch that's now filled with water. You've created an unnatural, in a sense, an unnatural
You
river.
destroy.
What's that? Go ahead.
I was gonna say you destroy the environment and the greens, the natural
Totally.
greens that was.
Because you've separated into two halves the isthmus. You now have the above the canal and below the canal. You have cut a wound, you've made a scar in the earth, and you've separated two halves. So whereas the forest and the land would have been integrated before, now you have a waterway that separates those two things. There aren't words for the kind of impact that has on the natural environment. I did a study, and I have a biology degree, and I remember doing a study about mice in the forest. And the study was to determine how putting a road through the forest would impact the mice population. I mean, whoever thinks of this, right? You put a road through the forest, big deal, right? Well, mice live in the forest, and the road to a mouse is quite large. And the worst thing about a road to a mouse is it's exposed. Because when a mouse wants to get from one place to the next, they generally try to go under the leaves and through the rotting logs, and they try to stay hidden. So if you put a road in the forest, you're opening up this huge exposed space. And if that mouse wants to get over to the other side of the forest now for food, to find a mate, it has to take this run across a road, and that a mouse will not do, because it knows that as soon as it gets on the road, a bird of prey is going to swoop out of the sky and pick it up. Now, if that's true with a mouse on a road, think of the enormous impact on the environment of cutting a ditch through a whole isthmus and then filling it up with water. Whatever natural things had lived in a connected and integrated way, that's all been severed now.
And then the ships as well. I'm sure they're polluting the water that animals will use to drink, and that's also hazardous to their health. So, and I like how you said it's a wound in the earth. That's
Yes.
exactly what it was.
It's a man-made wound in the earth. Yeah. We're bad this way. If you look at the nuclear bomb testings in the South Pacific, there are areas of the South Pacific that cannot be revisited because of the nuclear testing out there. The radioactivity is too high. In the name of these building bigger bombs, in the name of the Cold War, you had many, many years out in the South Pacific where they just, destroyed the islands. And you
Some
still
places
can't
in
go to those
Japan.
places because of that.
Some places in Japan you can't even go to still.
What's that?
Some places in Japan you still can't even go to.
Yeah. well, Chernobyl's off limits still too. Chernobyl's a
Yeah,
great example of
that
what
was really bad.
we're looking at, because Chernobyl, you know, the whole idea of nuclear power was very exciting to people. But what happens when something goes wrong? It seems like for every advance we make, there's this dark side as well that has to be considered. Very good. So if we sum up what we've been saying, okay, in the consideration of this Panama story, we're going to be on it for 2 weeks. So you get to look at what was due for this week to write your post, and then also next week. So by the time you get to the end of this book and you've looked at all the stuff that's on your sites, you're going to be very knowledgeable about this. You can have these categories in your mind for understanding the story. Such a large thing as the Panama Canal. It's going to have an impact on nature. It's going to have an impact on human beings. And it's going to have political undertones. This is the human condition. Everything we do, nature, other human beings, and politics and policy. When we get to the end of the story, it's going to be a good question to ask. For this course, it's a necessary question to ask. How would we choose which people should be remembered? Which people deserve to be memorialized? Because sometimes we memorialize people. Sometimes we build memorials and monuments to events, okay, achievements. So if we're going to do a memorial or a monument that has something to do with the Panama Canal, who do we choose? Do we do it at all? We have to be very careful, right? Because as we're saying, with all these human achievements, impact on nature, impact on other people, political undertones, how do we memorialize and remember the achievement? And in that achievement, who deserves the focus? You know, is it Teddy Roosevelt because he was the heart and the soul and the mover and the groover that made it happen? Is it Teddy Roosevelt? Should we have a statue of him at the, you know, you enter the Panama Canal and there's a statue of Teddy Roosevelt? Would that be it? That's the kind of thing we want to be thinking about. If we want this history to come back into public awareness, because clearly we're not aware, we don't know anything about it. Outside of this course, probably never would have thought about it, okay? But here's this enormous story that we should be aware of for the lessons that it teaches. So having a memorial or a monument is one way of making sure that that story is remembered. But then again, now we have an added challenge. What kind of memorial or monument? For whom? For what? Why? Where? What does it look like? What is it made out of? You see what I'm saying? The monument forces the issue. And we only have a few minutes left, so I want to end with a monument that is in the United States, and that I remember had a huge impact on me when I first saw it. If you go to Washington, D.C., people usually shoot right over to the Lincoln Memorial, and then you have the Jefferson Memorial. Well, if you walk the path from the Lincoln Memorial around towards the Jefferson Memorial, you're going to pass an area where you have the memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. It's striking. And it disturbed me when I saw it, because it's very modern. It's not in the classical style that you see with the Lincoln Memorial or the Jefferson Memorial. It's kind of rectangular. And he's very imposing. He doesn't really look warm or inviting. And there are words, you know, carved from his words are carved around the statue. It's not really a statue. It's kind of part of a big block, right? And it comes up, it kind of surprises you, because you're walking along a path where there's bushes and trees, and then you come around this corner, and there he is. There's Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of our true American heroes of the 20th century. Anybody who's read the letter from the Birmingham jail knows this to be so. And everything else he did, yes, but read the letter from the Birmingham jail. It'll take you half an hour. And he puts out all his principles for what he's doing in the letter, and he justifies what he does on the basis of an entire Western and Judeo-Christian tradition of fighting for justice. He roots himself right in the very foundations of Western culture. I had a student, I know of a student who said, it really was shocking. She said Martin Luther King just didn't get it. I was like, what? You know what she meant? She meant that he didn't believe in violence. Because if you look at your BLM now and, you know, the kind of movements that are moving now, they're all pro-violence. Violence has to be used to tear down the existing structure to build something new. And Martin Luther King Jr. was opposed to violence. And he rooted himself in a long-standing tradition against violence. And so you have young people today saying things like, oh, well, you know, Martin Luther King, he just didn't get it. You don't even know really what to say when you hear that. My only problem with that statue in Washington is that they put it too far out of the way. If you go in the Lincoln Memorial, get that incredible statue of Abraham Lincoln, and then in very readable letters all around the walls are his speeches. You can stand there in the Lincoln Memorial and read the words of Abraham Lincoln and be inspired by them. You got to go find Martin Luther King. And it's great when you do. But I mean, to me, I throw it out there, something you can think about as you think about these memorials. Why is he all the way out there? Why is that, which is so necessary for us to have right now, today, something which is so far removed in, you know, on the landscape in Washington, D.C.? Here's another thing that's really weird in Washington, D.C. The World War I monument, okay, is virtually unfindable. It's so hidden, and they've allowed it to fall into disrepair. So World War I, an enormous event in human history with many lessons to teach us. And you can't find it. And when you do find it, you discover that nobody's taking care of it. Okay. Any questions, any observations, anything you'd like to contribute? Anthony, you just turned green. Did you do something? You made yourself look green.
Yeah, something just came up and it changed colors.
Okay.
I think I've just observed. Well, I've came to the conclusion in myself, my opinion, that I don't think there will ever be a memorial or a structure that will please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, when I saw the 9/11 memorial, I was like, well, that's blah. Like I expected something, you know, bigger and better. But I guess, and I've just come to the conclusion now that there will never be something for everyone. Will never please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard to do. It's going to be hard to do.
You're right. It probably is impossible to get a memorial that will please everyone. Should we try?
Yes, we should definitely try. That's for sure.
Why should we try?
Because it's important to, like I stated in my discussion board, to make sure for certain events, for history not to repeat itself, for one, for us not to make the same mistakes, and to always remember, like, unless we forget.
Yes,
it is important.
Yeah, lest we forget. Yeah. We do forget, but we can try not to. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone else want to make a comment? Saida, I haven't heard from you tonight. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's just I'm with my kid.
Okay.
So I put my camera up. He's just running around the house.
Okay. I understand. I totally understand.
Yeah. I have to tell this class has so much impact on me right now because I have learned about so many things already that I had no clue existed.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, history was important, but the kind of history that was presented to me was just the kings and their heritages and the kind of the land they own, and a couple of major wars and that. But I recently been to a park here in Frisco, and it is a memorial park, Veterans Memorial Park. It has all of these monoliths, which has all of the You know, all of the people who died in the Vietnam War,
Mm,
any other wars. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've been there.
hmm
I didn't actually recognize the importance of it unless we started discussing about it. And
hmm
you know, just the way you just said that, why should we build a monument and where should it be and how should it be? It actually got me thinking, like, wow, so many things impact so
hmm
many people. Really
hmm
important for us to know why and how we are here today
hmm
because of whose effort. So many people who have made efforts for the country, for the well-being of their people, of their communities.
hmm
There's just so many things that I'm learning about, and it's fun.
It's
I'm
not.
gonna take so much time with the discussion.
I think you're going
I
to
want
enjoy
to.
doing some of the studies on Panama Canal. Sounds like you're really getting interested in history. But one thing we are learning is that the history is not simple, right? It's complicated. It has layers. So one of the problems I have when I listen to discourse today is people will say, oh, that thing was totally bad, or it was totally good, or that person was totally bad, or totally good. And I think I mentioned it to you guys last week. You don't put a statue up to a person because a person was perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect human. You put a statue up to a person because they got one thing right, because they did, they managed to do something good. But we've forgotten this kind of multi-layered situation. If you build a canal, it's great, and we celebrate the human achievement. It becomes one of the eighth wonders of the world, and yada yada yada. But there was also, apartheid, destruction of nature, political machinations in the background. It's like the whole situation of the human condition is fraught with this kind of tension that has to be balanced. Um, One of the things we're going to talk about later, I'm going to let you go in a minute here, it's 8 o'clock. People who are hoping for utopia, they commit terrible acts of injustice trying to build their utopia, because there's no such thing as utopia. And you listen to people talk today and it's like, oh, we're going to make everything perfect. And that's not wisdom about life. We do the best we can, even with a monument. Like Yanira is saying, you'll never make people totally happy with your monument. You won't. But does that mean you don't try? There has to be something. Okay, you poor people, it is 8 o'clock. I will let you go. Thank you for your attendance. I'll put this recording up on YouTube as I have the others, and I will see you next week, next Tuesday, 7 p.m. And please have everything about the Panama Canal under your wing and have read this book so we can have a good conversation. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night.